What the fuck is this?
I was born with a dick in my brain, yeah, fucked in the head. My stepfather said that
Wonder Woman 1984 released to theaters and HBO Max on Christmas, and the reception has been mixed to say the least. And since then, the score has quickly dropped. I know Rotten Tomatoes scores aren't the end-all be-all to what makes a good movie, but such a sharp drop in a short amount of time does raise some eyebrows. But as of right now, people seem to either love it or hate it. I've watched this movie a few times, and I've been sitting on it, letting it sink in and marinate.
Let that marinate.
The secret is to keep them nice and moist.
And the one word I can use to describe this movie, for me anyway, is disappointing. And to help me explain why I feel that way, I decided to break this video up into 3 sections. The first part are going to be things that I think the movie does right and that I do enjoy, because there are some things in here that I like. The second part are going to be things that I don't like and I don't think work that well at all. And finally, I'm going to go over what I think are the biggest reasons why people don't like this movie. But before I get into that, I want to give a basic rundown of the story. There's a strange artifact that grants wishes, and a millionaire gets a hold of it and obtains the stone's power. And because of him granting wishes, it's causing chaos around the world, and Wonder Woman must stop him. And also Cheetah is there. More on her later. And also, I'll go more into this later, but I'd like to mention now this movie has a very cheesy feel to it. It's definitely more upbeat and lighthearted than the first film, but there are times where it does come across as goofy and cheesy. I'll talk more about that later, but for now, let's get into the things that I liked.
then he played ping pong with his own gang dong.
The intro with the mascara was cool, although a bit too long, because the takeaway from this section is so small that I don't think it really warranted this long of an intro. But I really did like seeing the Amazons and the island again. Chris Pine is back as Steve Trevor, and the relationship between him and Diana is good. And I like how their roles are basically switched from the first film. In the first movie, Diana was the fish out of water and everything is new to her. Now it's 70 years later and Steve is new to everything. So it's fun seeing that switch. It's good that the relationship worked, because if it didn't, this whole movie would fall apart, because it takes up most of the runtime. Gal Gadot was good as Wonder Woman as usual, despite some questionable line reads.
Need you to give me the stone. What happened to it?
But overall, she was good as expected, and she hit some really good emotional scenes. The best one being when she has to pull herself away from Steve and renounce her wish. That one nearly got me. Now, Maxwell Lord is the best character. I mentioned earlier that this movie has a cheesy feel to it at times, and this goes for Maxwell Lord. He's over the top, but damn it, he's so entertaining. When I first saw him, I was a little turned off by his goofy nature, but the more it went on, the more I was enjoying Pedro Pascal's performance. And his character is more interesting than I thought he was going to be. He's a millionaire, but he got there by being sleazy, and he's also kind of a loser. And he's actually on the verge of losing it all until he gets the stone that grants wishes. And watching him use and manipulate people to grant his wishes, and become more deranged as the movie progressed, was really entertaining. So yeah, Maxwell Lord, best character in the whole movie. Now, the score by Hans Zimmer was fine. I wasn't blown away by it. I did like the inclusion of Beautiful Lie from BVS, so it was cool hearing it again. Cheetah's theme was just decent. So the score overall was fine and serviceable, but nothing out of this world, and it didn't blow my mind. Let me see, anything else? Oh, the scene with the invisible jet and fireworks was pretty, and that's it. I know that seems like a short list, and that's because it is. There really wasn't a whole lot that I liked. So let's go ahead and hop into the next section.
What the fuck's happening? I think I'm fucking melting.
The action scenes kinda suck. They're weak sauce. Don't bring it to my barbecue.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
First off, there are only a few of them throughout the whole movie, and there's actually a point where it's almost nearly an hour between one action set piece to the next. And in between is Steve Trevor's and Diana's relationship, Maxwell doing stuff, and Barbara is just there. And like I said, I think Maxwell is a very interesting and fun character. I like Diana and Steve's relationship, but at times it kind of feels like a drag, and you're kind of just waiting around for something to happen. And when you finally get to the action, it looks so low budget, cheap, and cheesy. Now, I know this is by design. It's to harken back to the Christopher Reeve Superman movies. I know that people are on wires and they get thrown across the room, but for me personally, I don't like it. I don't like that look, I don't like that feel, I just don't think it's appealing. Well, speaking of action, I want to touch on the final battle with Cheetah. It looks bad and it's just disappointing. The CGI is spotty and looks pretty bad, and Wonder Woman is wearing this awesome suit of armor that serves no purpose other than to block against Cheetah's attacks, and the fight's over pretty quickly too. I could forgive the CG if the fight itself was just more impressive and better choreographed. With the movie being delayed 6 months, I figured they would have had time to touch up some of the CGI to make it at least look better, and to cover up little things, like that green screen you can see reflected off the glasses. I don't know, I don't work in the movie biz. But anyway, the few action scenes that we do get throughout the movie are pretty disappointing, and I don't like the look and style. So the MacGuffin that gets the movie going is the stone that grants wishes. Maxwell wishes to have the stone's power to grant wishes, and then starts using it to benefit himself and eventually start fucking up the whole world. The way the stone works is that after a wish is granted, the stone will then take something away from the person that made the wish, something dear to them. It's pretty simple, but the movie doesn't make the rules of this wishing system clear from the beginning, and it leads to confusion in some scenes later on. We find out the history of the stone and how it destroys civilizations, and that it takes away something from the people who make the wishes, at about the halfway point in the movie. This is way after Diana Diana, Barbara, and Maxwell all made their wishes. And by this point, it looks like Diana is losing her powers because Barbara wished to be like her. So I was thinking the stone was transferring Diana's powers to Barbara because of her wish. That's actually not what's happening though. Diana's losing her powers because she wished for Steve back, and Barbara is losing her humility to become like Diana. Again, this isn't made clear until about the halfway point in the movie after we learn about the history of the stone. And before that, we've seen Maxwell manipulate people into granting wishes that benefit him, but at the end of those wishes, he will just start saying things that he wants from them, which also caused confusion because I wasn't exactly sure what was happening or why he could do that, because the rules of this wishing system wasn't made clear at the beginning. A better way to set this up and actually establish the rules would be at the beginning, when this guy wishes for a cup of coffee like normal, but then once he gets that cup of coffee, have him be fired a few scenes later. This way we can see that he wished for something and something bad happened to him, showing us that the stone giveth and the stone taketh. And we can still have our exposition about the stone at the halfway point in the movie, but now we'll have a better idea of how it works, which makes more scenes make more sense. I just think it should establish the rules a little bit better about the wishes. Now let's talk about Barbara. She doesn't need to be in this movie. Her transformation is kind of sudden, and the way she becomes Cheetah is by Maxwell granting her another wish even though she already made one. And she says she wants to be something that no one's ever been before. She wants to be an apex predator. And that apparently translates to becoming a cheetah girl. But I don't see the point of Cheetah being in this movie other than have someone for Wonder Woman to fight. And even then, we only have 2 scenes of them facing each other. They could have just planted the seed for her to become Cheetah in a later movie. But instead we get it here in between the love story and main villain. So her story doesn't fit too well in the movie. I think they could have had Barbara still in this movie, make her wish, and then by the end of this movie be at the same state where she was when she saved Maxwell. But instead of having a final battle with Wonder Woman, she instead fucks off and we don't see her till a later movie, because her inclusion doesn't add a whole lot. So this finale is kinda whack. Maxwell gets drunk with power and is granting wishes and destroying the world. And Diana can't get to him, but her lasso can, and she uses it to communicate with everyone and convince them to renounce their wish. And everyone just does it. I'm sorry, if I'm in that situation, I'm not renouncing shit. Now I thought the way this was going to play out was that she was going to convince Maxwell to renounce his wish, and then maybe that would undo all the wishes he's been granting since he doesn't have the power anymore. Or maybe she would convince him to grant her a wish, which would be forcing everyone to renounce their wish. I just don't buy everyone renouncing their wishes, especially when things are in complete chaos. Also, I think it's assumed that Barbara renounced her wish because she turns back into a human, but we never see her say it, and we don't see her again after this point, so maybe she didn't? I don't know. So those are the things that I believe don't work that well in this movie at all, and I just don't like them. And the good stuff is good, but it's not good enough to outweigh the rest of it. But now let's move on to part 3, which is covering the biggest reason why I think people don't like this movie.
Well, this is called ass rape, and we're shooting the jail scene.
So I've already mentioned it several times throughout this video, and it's that this movie feels at times very cheesy and cheap. And I think this is the single biggest reason why people don't like the movie. It goes past bright and lighthearted into a more goofy and dumb territory. It feels very different from the first. It's almost a polar opposite. The first film was much darker, which worked for the movie because it took place during World War I. And that benefited the movie a lot because it showed mankind at its worst, adding to Diana's struggle to whether or not mankind is worth saving. Now I'm not saying Wonder Woman 1984 has to have the same tone or be just as dark, but being this drastically different from the first can be a turnoff for most people. But the goofiness really shines through in the action set pieces that had this like cheesy aesthetic to them, which I know is by design, but in comparison to the first one, just come off as cheap, lazy, and just look bad. And that cheap, cheesy feel is what I think people hate about this movie. It's a big contrast to the first one, and goes past lighthearted and bright to more cheesy and goofy. Also, Wonder Woman herself doesn't move the same as she did in previous films. In her first movie, and even in Batman vs Superman, she's more fast and fierce. Here, she feels very floaty and slow. She just doesn't feel like the same warrior we saw in previous movies. And I get that she's losing her powers and is technically becoming weaker, but even in the highway scene where she's vulnerable to bullets, she's still strong enough to destroy the trucks, she's fast enough to run past them, and she even jumps over them. Hell, she even catches a bullet with her lasso. She just feels very nerfed in this film. Even in the final battle when she's back to her full strength, she just doesn't feel like the strong, fierce warrior that we know she can be and she has demonstrated before. Now, I don't hate this movie as much as others, but I don't love it either. There's several things that I liked, but there's more that I didn't. And the good, sadly, doesn't outweigh the bad in this movie for me. I think it fails to live up to the first one, and I really just don't like the style this movie is going for. I respect Patty Jenkins' decision as a filmmaker to do that, being such a drastic shift from the first, but with all the negative that I see with this film, I just see it more as just disappointing. And of course, I asked you guys what you thought, and the responses were mixed. Some people liked it, some thought it was just okay or decent, some people loved it, and others just hated it. Personally for me, I think it's definitely better than Suicide Squad and Justice League, but I definitely rank it below Shazam, Aquaman, and the first Wonder Woman. For me, it was just really disappointing. But anyway guys, that's gonna do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, go and drop a like on it. And go ahead and leave a comment, let me know what you think about the movie. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.
Now you try. First get a jar. Patrick, that's a gun.
Yes.